So we're going to focus this week on conditionals, using conditional statements with Scratch. And you've had a little bit of an introduction to that when we did repeat until loops, where it would do some loop until something would happen, like the volume would get over 60. So you've done some simple conditionals. We're getting a little bit more advanced conditionals and combinations of conditionals this week. So today, conditionals, we're going to do a little practice on truth tables. You're going to have a homework assignment that you need to go find in Google Classroom. And then you should be good to go with the pair programming. Okay, so first question. We're not going to have you stand up because you're listening to a video, but think about whether or not you are a member of one of these groups. I'm going to have a couple of them. So you are not over 6 feet tall. And you basically want to ask yourself true or false. Okay, so you are not over 6 feet tall. Answer for yourself if that's true or false. For me, that is definitely false. Wait, I mean it's true because I'm definitely not over 6 feet tall. I'm 5'6". Okay, you are 16 or you have brown hair. So if you are 16 years old or you have brown hair, then you would qualify and that would be true. You are not a junior or a sophomore. Okay, so if you're not a junior or a sophomore, that would make you a freshman or a senior, which would not be the case for most of you because you're all sophomores. You are a boy and not a member of the soccer team, or you play an instrument. So you might be a girl and qualify have a true if you play an instrument. Otherwise, if you're a boy, you could only be part of this group if you don't play on the soccer team. And a boy, if you play an instrument, you could also be part of the group. So lots of different weird combinations. You got to kind of think through to see if something might be true or false. When we're dealing with logical operators, so things like and not and or, and we also do parentheses, there actually is an order of operations of how we have to evaluate them. And then we're not going to spend a lot of time with that. But for example, if you see the problem that looks like this, you ask yourself, is this true or false? And the question is not, and then parentheses 5 greater than 6, and 3 greater than 4, or 7 greater than 9. So that's a pretty complicated problem. We're going to come back to that at the very end. But we have to think about order of operations. In other words, we have to look for what's inside the parentheses first and evaluate that. Then we evaluate the nots. Then we evaluate the ands. And then finally, we're going to evaluate the ors. So we're going to come back to that a little bit later. Okay, so in Scratch, we have 3 sets of conditionals that we can play around. Listen, you can see the little coding blocks. We have an or, we have an and we have a not. And so we're going to have a condition, and we'll have if your hair is brown or you're 16 years old. So those would be 2 different conditions. And then you want to evaluate if the condition 1 is true or the condition 1 is false, and then condition 2 is true or false, then what is the outcome of each of these little operators? So for example, the first one, we have condition 1 is true, condition 2 is true. Then we ask ourselves, if condition 1 is true or condition 2 is true, what's the outcome? And the idea with an or statement is if either one is true, then the answer is true. It evaluates to give you a true. And so you would fill in this little table and say that's true. Next one, if condition 1 is true or condition 2 is false. Well, as long as one of them is true, it's going to evaluate to true because it's an or statement. So once again, you're going to have a true. Oops, sorry, got to do the and statement first. So back to the ands, my bad. If condition 1 is true and condition 2 is true, they're both true, that's going to evaluate to true. And then finally not. If condition 1 is true and you do a not, that means you're going to find the opposite. So the opposite of true is false for the first case, and it's also false for the second case. All right, so let's move to the next row. Sorry. So condition 1 is true, condition 2 is false. Let's evaluate the or. If 1 is true or 2 is false, that as long as 1 is true, you're good. So you'd say that is true. And then the and. In order for an and to be true, then both of the things have to be true. Both condition 1 and condition 2 have to be true in order that to evaluate to true. In this case, condition 1 is true, condition 2 is false. So that's going to evaluate to false. And then finally, for the not, we take the opposite of each. And so we're going to get false for the first one and true for the second one. Okay, next one. Evaluate a false or a true. Again, that's going to be a true. As long as one of them is true, the response is true. Let's look at the and. False, condition 1 is false, and condition 2 is true. They both have to be true in order to be true, so that one is going to be false. And then finally, we're going to not both of them, so we're going to get a true and then a false. That should be reversed order. It should be true first and then false. And then, so I'm just going to go true, and that's false, because we're going to not this is true, not true is false. And then finally, false or false. If neither one is true, then it's going to evaluate to false. And then finally with the and, false and false. Since they're both false, they need to both be true for that one to be working, and so that's also false. And then finally we're going to not both the false, and we're going to get true and true. Okay, so that's the idea of these operations, to or, using an or logical operation, or an and, or a not. So let's use some examples. If the day of the week starts with a T, so kind of go through and think through which of these start with a T, and then you're going to put a little T in the box if they do. Okay, so what I can thinking is Monday doesn't, Tuesday does, Wednesday doesn't, Thursday does, Friday doesn't, Saturday doesn't, and Sunday doesn't. So the only ones that do start with a T are Tuesday and Thursday. All right, next one. If the day of the week has more than 6 letters. So which of these weekdays has more than 6 letters? Well, if you count them all up, you'll find that Monday doesn't, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday does, Friday doesn't, Saturday does. So the 4 days of the week that do have more than 6 letters are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Now we're going to combine those two. We're going to talk about days of the week that have T's and days of the week that have more than 6 letters. So let's take a look. If the day of the week starts with a T and, so this is an and statement, which means that both things have to be true, which one of those is going to be valid? So let's take a look. So this one is true and that one's true, so there you go. This one is going to be a true case because it has both starts with a T and has more letters, so that one is going to evaluate to true. This one and this one is going to evaluate to true because it's an and. Remember, they have to both be true in order to be true. Now all the rest, it's not an or, since they're not both true, then the rest are going to all evaluate to false. So it's going to look like this. Okay. Now it's hard to see the code. It didn't show up very well in this slide. But if you want to write this code in the form of Scratch, it would look something like this. If, then you have this little code right here, if letter 1 of day of the week. So day of the week is a variable that contains different days of the week, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If letter 1, in other words the first letter of day of the week, is a T, okay, so we figured out that was true with Tuesday and Thursday, and the length of the day of the week is greater than 6. So day of the week could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If it's greater than 6, the length of it, meaning how many letters it has, is greater than 6. So that's going to be the ones we talked about before, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. Then we want to evaluate the and, those two things together, to have both those be true. Well, that's going to be what we see here and here with Tuesday and Thursday. And so in this particular case of code, if they're both true, it's going to say starts with a T and 6 letters, so it's going to report something out. So we use these kinds of advanced conditionals in all kinds of places when we're coding. Okay, so let's look at this one now. Go ahead and try this on your own, see if you can figure it out. So pause the video and take a look. If the day of the week starts with a T or has more than 6 letters. So figure out which of those are true and which of those are false. Pause the video and try to go through each one and figure them out. Okay, hopefully you're back. And the ones where we have a true, starts with the letter T or has 6 letters, it's going to be most of them, right? So we know that Monday doesn't start with a T, and it's also 6 letters, so that one is not going to be true. But all of the rest are, except for, so Monday, Friday, and Sunday, they don't start with a T, and they're less than 6 letters, so they aren't, but all the rest of them are. Because this is an or statement, so it's like as long as one of them is true, you're good. If they're both true, even better, but all you need is to have one thing that's true. And here's the code that you would use in Scratch to designate this conditional. So if letter 1 of day of the week is T, or length of day of the week is greater than 6, then starts with a T or is greater than 6 letters. So then you're going to include some little operation in here in your conditional statement. Another way to deal with conditionals in testing if something might be true is to do what we call nested loops. In other words, you're going to test for one condition, and then when you know the answer to that condition, you're going to test for another condition. So it's going to look something like this. We have the outer loop if letter 1 of day of the week equals true. Then, Okay, now we're only going to enter inside this part of the loop if it turns out that letter 1 of day of the week is true. So that would be Tuesday or Thursday. Then we're going to come inside this loop. Then it says if length of the day of week is greater than 6, so that would be true with Tuesday and Thursday, then you're going to say starts with a T and is greater than 6 letters. Else it's going to say starts with a T and is less than 6 letters. So we are in day of the week in the English language, we're always going to end up here. Okay, so you test thing, and then with inside you test another thing. Now, if it isn't, look at this little if statement here. If it isn't, if the first letter is not a T, then it's going to exclude this whole section, and it's going to jump right to this else. And it's going to do this behavior. It's just going to say it doesn't start with a T. So this is another way to kind of manipulate and ask questions using conditionals with Scratch. Now, one question is this particular equivalent to an AND statement, or is it equivalent to an OR statement? So think about that a little bit. And hopefully you'll see it's more like an AND statement. In other words, you say, if this is true, then you're going to go inside, and if this is true, then you're going to do this. So this is sort of another way to do an AND statement with actually using an AND operator. Okay, so let's go back to this little case right here that I started with. For example, is this true or false when we talked about order of operations? And we talked about how the first thing you want to evaluate is what is inside the parentheses. So you ask yourself, is 5 greater than 6? And the answer is false. And then you're going to say, is 3 less than 4? And that answer is true. Is 7 greater than 9? And that answer is false. Okay, so you evaluate it first inside the parentheses. Then the next order of operation is the not. So we're going to do the not. So not 5 greater than 6. In other words, the opposite of false is going to give you a true. And after that, we're going to evaluate the and statement. So let's bring, we're going to have true and true, because the 3 is less than 4 is true. So we're going to evaluate the true and the true. So true and true is going to evaluate to true. And then finally, we're going to we have the false from before, from the 7 greater than 9. So we go true or false, and that final outcome is going to be true. So that's just an example of how you can do a pretty complex logical conditional with order of operations. Okay, so we're going to have you look and create what are called truth tables. And so we have put into Google Classroom a little Google Doc that you want to go in and fill out for yourself. So you want to create a little table. And so let me give you a look at what that looks like. I'm going to bring up a different file so you can see it. So here it is. And here's the idea. We have a chunk of code. And the chunk of code is down right here, and it says, an example is given below. If Boolean 1 equals false or string 1 equals cat, then it's going to say first or it's going to say second. And you want to come up with a little Boolean table. Now these are pretty straightforward, but as Booleans get pretty, as logic gets pretty complex, it can get confusing. Now a Boolean is a variable that can be true or false. That's all it can be, just one or the other. It's true or false. A string could be any kinds of, it's a variable that where you start words or letters. And then a value is like a number value. So we have different kinds of variables that we might want to be using in Scratch. So here's a little example. So we have Boolean 1, and the possible values that Boolean 1 could be are true or false. And so we fill out this table here. We have two, we're going to put 2 for true, and we're going to put 2 for false. And then we're going to think of possible strings. And so we know that the string is cat. So let's go ahead and put cat for one and dog for the other, cat and dog. And now what we're going to do is evaluate with this truth table what these results are of evaluating these conditionals. So Boolean 1 equals false. Let's look over here. Is Boolean 1 equal to false? No, it's not equal to false. So you would put false. And then you're going to say for the rest of that column, is Boolean 1 false here? No, it's true, so we put false. Is Boolean 1 false, right? Is it false? Yes, it is. Okay, so the output of that would be true. Is Boolean 1 false? The output of that would be true. So you're evaluating for each of these values, is that Boolean equal to false? And so now we have our results, okay? Now let's look at the evaluate, is string 1 equal to cat? So let's look at these string 1 different possibilities. Cat, is a string 1 equal to cat? Yes, it is. So we can put a true in there. What about the next one? Is string 1 equal to cat here? No, it is not, so we'll put a false in there. And then finally we got true, and then we got false. So you get the idea. Okay? So now we evaluated each of those. Now we want to evaluate the total conditional, which is evaluated right here. Okay? Is Boolean 1 equal to false, or string 1 equal to cat? So if either one is true, the response should be true. So in the case of the first one, because the string 1 is a cat, the answer is true. In the second one, they're both false, so the answer is false. The third one, they're both true, so the answer is true. And the fourth one, at least one of them is true, so the answer is true. And then finally, with your truth table, you can come up with the outcome. What's going to happen as a result of this? So in the case of this particular code, because both of them, or one or the other is true, the output is going to be first. And then for the next one, because the outcome is false, then the loop part that will get executed is this one, so it's going to say second. And take a look at the third one. Because it's true, which one's it going to say? Hopefully you can see that it's going to say first. And for the last one, also first. Okay. So what you're going to do with your truth table, this is another little copy of it, okay? So you have a little code snippet, and you want to make a little table of the different types of values that you could have in your conditional, and then you're going to evaluate what happens when one is true or false. And so I'll get it set up for you. I'm going to make a little table. It's going to look like this. I got Boolean 1, I got value 1, I got Boolean 1 equals true, value 1 equals 3, and then I've got Boolean equals 3 equals true, or value equals 1. And then we're going to work through, I'm going to do the first column for you. So I'm kind of setting you up for what it should look like. So you might do a couple different values for value 1. We know that 3 is the one we're looking for, so I'm going to put 2 in there just to mix it up a little bit. So then we're going to evaluate the first column. Is Boolean 1 equal to true? Right here, so we're right here. Is Boolean 1 equal to true? For the first column, looks like it is. So we put true. Value 1 equal to 3? False. So is either one of them true? If Boolean 1 is true, or value 1 equals 3 is true, then you're going to put true. Since one of them is, the answer is true. So then you want to complete the rest of that little truth table. And then there's several other little code snippets, and I want you to go ahead and do a similar table for each of those in your Google Doc. Okay? So go ahead and work on your truth tables while you're in class. When you're done with that, then you can go ahead and start your pair programming.